Hi, I'm Mystery Shy, and I am tired. I've been to several anime conventions in the past, but this was my first time attending Anime Expo in LA. Due to budget constraints, we only spent 2 days attending the event on Thursday and Friday. It was a real shame to miss Saturday and Sunday, but honestly, I was so exhausted by Friday night that I don't know if I could have lasted 2 more days. We pre-ordered our badges and had them shipped to our place, so we didn't have to wait in line to check in once we got there. The badges were pretty interesting because you had to swipe them on this machine when entering or exiting the con. Lanyards were provided at different entrances inside of free tote bags. Mine was a My Hero Academia lanyard, but they also had lanyards for Windbreaker, which I've never seen. If you didn't want to use their app, you could also pick up a free guidebook for the event, which held basically everything you might want to know, and most importantly, maps of the event. I might accidentally mispronounce the names of some things later in this video, but please give me a break. I'm just a little guy, okay? It was really hot in LA, but thankfully, once you descended down into Kentia Hall, which was in the lower part of the building, you got to feel the temperature drop significantly. I always preferred the Artist Alley over the Dealer's Hall because I want to support small independent artists, and you can find things there that just don't exist in mainstream merch. I cannot stress how big and crowded this hall was. If you have trouble with claustrophobia and loud noises, then you will have a tough time here. Thankfully, there was a pretty straightforward system for labeling the artist booths. If you went through on your first sweep and saw something you liked but weren't willing to commit yet, you could just write down the label for the booth, a letter for the aisle, and a number for the stand. This made it incredibly easy to find a booth again later. At one of the booths, an artist was displaying a new graphic novel that looked really cool. The book is I'm the Grim Reaper by Graveweaver. I wanted to buy a copy, but unfortunately couldn't. The book print sadly isn't due for release until September. I planned a pre-order and would encourage others to at least check it out. All of the artists that I met were really nice, if a little overwhelmed. The funny thing was that often when I was trying to buy something from a booth, it was actually being manned by a friend of the artist who had no knowledge of anime, so I had to describe a character rather than say their name. I was also shopping for friends that weren't attending, and the artists were all very kind when I asked if I could take photos to text them. A bunch of groups of artists had collabed to run special stamp rally promos. Basically, if you bought a type of themed merch from a booth, Dungeon Meshi for example, they would give you a stamped card. If you went and bought merch from other booths on the card and filled it up with stamps, you would get a free prize. I'm not fully clear on the specifics because I didn't fully participate. It would take a lot of money to fill one of those cards out. I mostly bought a bunch of small posters, keychains, and a bunch of stickers. I can't keep track of all the artists I bought from, but here are some of the many. CWI Lock, A Sui Nui, Lavender Ice, Clevenzu, Byanyo, Hero Anthem. The con is so huge that I wasn't even aware of the exhibitor hall until our second day. I had done the majority of my shopping on Thursday, but when I heard there was a Shark Robot booth in the exhibitor hall, I had to check it out. I am a massive Helluva Boss / Has-Been Hotel fan, so I'm not going to pass up the chance to support the show and get official merch. Unfortunately, because I didn't realize they were there that first day, they were already sold out of several items. They had these adorable mini acrylic standees, but by the time that I got there, I think they only had standees for Stella and Striker left. I was so tempted, but really low on funds at that point, so I ended up getting this really beautiful Luna shirt and this full-size Luna standee. The rest of the exhibitor hall was a mashup of your typical larger-sized dealer's booths with figures, shirts, mystery grab bags, etc., and grand official booths for the biggest names in the anime and manga market. The Kodansha booth was one of the first ones you saw when you walked in the main doors up the stairs. They were handing out thin manga samples so you could get a taste of their selection. The samples covered 5 categories: action, romance, all ages, magic, and BL/Yuri/LGBTQ+. My favorite is easily the magic sampler, which included samples of the Spellbook Library, Witch Hat Atelier, Welcome to Demon School Aruma-kun, Magus of the Library, and Beyond the Clouds. I'd never heard of the Spellbook Library before, and I'm going to add it to my already overflowing reading list. Kodansha also had their own mini stamp rally. You got a passport that, if you took it to the different themed sections of their booth and got it stamped, they would give you a free patch. Each area of the booth had a cool photo backdrop based on one of these series. I got the Blue Lock patch. The Viz exhibit took up a chunk of floor space to the middle left. I didn't stay long, but I did get a really quality manga sampler that is the size of a regular full book. My favorite new-to-me series in here were Go Kura Kugai, Magia Lumiere Magical Girls Inc., and One Piece Ace's Story the manga. The other samples were a bit too artsy and sentimental for my tastes. The last major player I checked out was Crunchyroll, which was situated all the way in the back and had the second largest floor space. They had a dedicated arcade for people with a super premium account, and the line was really long. They also had a Crunchyroll store and free swag. I got a Kaiju number 8 button pin. But by far the worst time I had at the con, however, took place at their solo leveling experience. I want to preface by saying that Solo Leveling is one of my favorite Korean comics, and I've been reading the books as the English prints come out. I only saw the first 3 episodes on Crunchyroll because that's all you can see for free. When I saw they had some sort of interactive display based on Solo Leveling, I was super stoked. I hopped in line and waited. And waited. By the time I got around the corner to the actual entrance, I was starting to feel like maybe I'd made a mistake. The entrance of the experience had an arch, which, every few minutes, shot smoke down onto people in line. It looked cool, but it was really stinky, and it took a while to clear up. While in line, Crunchyroll started a giveaway on their dance floor, and us in line just had to watch, knowing that if we left, we'd be giving up the 20 minutes or so that we'd already waited. While the line started moving again, we were in a hallway decorated to look like the walls of a stone dungeon with small glowing crystals. We would wait, move a bit, and turn into another hall that looked exactly the same. Again and again. I was so tired I wanted to leave the line, but I couldn't really do so because I was trapped in. After what felt like an eternity, we finally arrived at the actual experience, praying that the nearly hour-long wait had been worth it. We got in this big inflatable bubble of a room with a small group of strangers, and a projector played the opening boss dungeon scene from the show on the walls. A staffer would occasionally tell us to kneel or stand in a circle. That was it. It took maybe 2 minutes, and then they were like,
"Hey guys, take a selfie to show everybody what a great time you had."
Nobody in my group did. We were all just so mad. If the wait time had been, 5 minutes, then yeah, it would have been pretty cool. But it was totally not worth the wait. I don't have much to say about this area. I spent maybe half an hour in this section because it didn't appeal to me all that much. When you first walked in, Hulu had a pretty sizable exhibit, and I got a free Hulu-branded power bank. If I recall correctly, the right side of this hall was almost entirely sets for cosplayers to pose in front of and take photos. I had originally planned on cosplaying as Nimona from the Netflix animated movie adaptation, and then I didn't. The rest of the hall was primarily fighting games and card games, neither of which I have any real interest in. Because we were only attending for the first 2 days, I was limited on what creators and notable people I could see. The ones I was most interested in were Lizzie Freeman, the voice actress for Pomni from The Amazing Digital Circus, and Kamome Shirahama, the writer and illustrator of the manga Witch Hat Atelier. I actually read this series by checking it out at my local library, so prior to the event, I went out and bought a copy of the first book so that I could get it signed. If, for whatever reason, you have never heard of Witch Hat Atelier, then please check it out. I'm begging you. It has some of the most unique and delightful art that I've ever seen in a manga series, and a really thoughtful story to tell. The manga takes place in a world in which regular people are separate from witches, those capable of performing magic. Coco, a young girl born a normal person, wishes badly to become a witch, but knows she cannot, until she discovers the truth of magic and its dark consequences if handled improperly. If you're looking for a new series, then please give this one a chance. Anyway, back to the original topic. I never did get to see either of them. I didn't realize until mid-morning Thursday that you needed a ticket to attend the signings, and the line I saw for tickets was insane. I wanted to see them, but not badly enough to stand in direct sun for hours to potentially not even get a ticket. Okay, maybe I'm just a big dummy, but it took me like an hour to figure out how the line system worked. This is the first con I've ever been to where the actual lines for the panels are not directly outside the door of the room. The lines were actually outside, say hooray for sunburn, as marked on their line guide map. When the time for the panel was close, a staffer or volunteer would guide the line inside through staff-only areas to get to the room. In some ways, it does make sense because it prevents people waiting in line for panels from clogging up hallways within the building. The panels were a nice break from the hustle and bustle of the con-going experience. I would usually take the time to snack on a treat from a vending machine and relax a while. My favorite panels, however, were the ones that were more interactive, like a game show or a debate. Unfortunately, there were a couple of panels that we wanted to go to that we missed. These included Heaven or Hell, the Church of Maizano service, and the Studio Trigger live drawing for Delicious in Dungeon. The AMV contest is almost always the highlight for me at a con. We heard that we needed to get tickets to attend this event and trekked all over trying to find them. It took almost an hour to track down a staffer and get a free ticket, but it turned out that we never even needed it. The AMV contest hall was nowhere near close to full. The room was enormous, so the staffers didn't even bother asking for tickets. The AMV contest had 7 categories in total: commercials/trailers/parodies, action, sentiments, fun and play, drama, rhythm and beat, and comedy and humor. This year, I think drama and rhythm and beat really shined. The contest lasted about 3 hours and thankfully had a short bathroom break halfway through. I'd actually seen a bunch of the AMVs before in previous contests, but the repeats I saw were deserving to be there. Lastly, I think some of the contest submissions I've seen in the past were better. The comedy section especially was just kinda weird. The convention is so big that going outside every time for a meal would be kind of impractical. There were plenty of food courts and food stands within the building serving your typical event fare, such as hot pretzels. If you went outside, there were tons of food trucks, with mostly Asian cuisine. Most of these areas had stages holding live performances, so it was a really nice place to hang out and eat. We had breakfast outside the con and lunch/dinner at the food trucks. On Thursday, I had some yakitori, which was about what I expected. On Friday, I got some takoyaki. I've never had takoyaki before, so I was really nervous that I wasn't gonna like it, but it was really good. I would love to have it again sometime. All the food trucks were insanely pricey, but that's to be expected of anything inside of the convention center. All in all, I had a great time at Anime Expo. It was just as massive and over the top as I expected it to be, and there's just something really special about being surrounded by people who are just as passionate as you. The layout of the convention was incredibly confusing at first, but I felt like I had a real handle on it by the end of the first day. I probably won't get the opportunity to go again just because of how expensive everything was, but if I do, I know I'll plan ahead better. I should have gotten tickets to the more exclusive events within the con, as well as lined up for popular panels early. Well, anyways, now that I've rambled on for a bit, I'm gonna go take a nap. Bye!
So strong.